Hey there, it's me, Dr. Daniel, and recently I've been getting hit with a ton of messages from Instagram, from Facebook, email, YouTube, all asking to discuss the immune system and immune function. As you can imagine, the immune system and immune function is very complex, but I'm going to go ahead and start the process of trying to create some videos that hopefully can help to create some clarity when it comes to understanding this very complex, very important, and amazing system. So in this video, again, I'm going to start the process of unraveling immunity, which is, like I said, hella complex, and doing my best to make sense of it so you can have meaningful action steps towards achieving some level of improvement in your immune system. Now, before I begin, I want this message to resonate with you. And if you're really interested in learning about the immune system, especially when it comes to preventing infections or overcoming an illness, we really need to be connected. And I say that we need more than ever to be connected with each other and to also reconnect or at least acknowledge that we are amazing beings. We have amazing bodies and we're all interconnected in that sense. And, just like you have these billions of cells that make up your body, and you've got billions of organisms, cells that are not human, that also are part of your body. And all of this comes together in a harmonious way to make you, you. We also live in communities, right? Whether it's in your own house, you've got other humans that are part of the bigger complex. You live in a city or in a town, and all the other people, again, these are like individual cells that all come together. So literally we are interconnected in that sense. And I know that you're hearing this message digitally, but I also know that as a human being, you were meant to be connected to me, the people around you in your community, and to the people and other inhabitants of this planet, all the animals, the plants, the fungi, viruses, bacteria, as much as any other organisms, that we're all interconnected in that way. And if you can grasp that, again, we can begin to have a stronger sense of what immunity is really about. In many ways, it seems that human nature is to be outside of ourselves, to externalize the world rather than see yourself as part of it. We think we live in the world when the world, in many ways, lives within us, literally. And for hundreds of years, our planet was thought to be the center of existence. Then, with a tiny lens, we discovered that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but actually rotated around this giant ball of gas that we later came to call the sun. And I'd like to remind you that the great scientists of the time strongly disagreed with this finding, and they even forbid the information to be shared across the world. They suppressed this information from getting out there. Sounds familiar, right? We can see this happening right now. Now, either way, Galileo's work, one of the great astronomers who first stated that the Earth was not the center of the universe, all this work led up to helping Isaac Newton to map out the movement of our planets and constellations, our stars all together. And this body of work allowed us to understand the solar system and how we get energy, literally how we have life on this planet. And what I'm trying to share here is that we are all part of something much bigger. And if you begin to grasp the concept of universality, of wholeness, and the grandeur of our existence in the cosmos, it can help to understand the microcosm and how equally grand and magnificent the microcosm, the microorganisms, the life that we cannot see but is there within our own bodies. And just like Earth is not the center of the universe, we now know that humans, with our human cells, are not the center of being human. Not at all. In fact, there is an entire undiscovered universe within our own body, one that contains highly specialized human cells, but also highly specialized cells that are not of human origin, but 100% contribute to the human experience and our very existence. Now, when it comes to the immune system, there are many things to discuss, but it needs to begin with the understanding that we have been assaulting, we've been vandalizing, we've been weakening and destroying our own immune system since before we were even born. In the months leading up to a baby's birth, the umbilical cord pulses with the equivalent of at least 300 quarts of blood each day. That's a lot of blood being pumped back and forth from the nutrients and oxygen-rich placenta to the rapidly growing baby child cradled in this sac of amniotic fluid. And this cord is a lifeline between the mother and the baby, bearing nutrients that sustain life and propel growth. Now, in a study spearheaded by the Environmental Working Group in collaboration with the Commonwealth Fund, researchers at 2 major laboratories found that an average of 200 industrial chemicals and pollutants in umbilical cord blood from babies born in August and September of 2004, what they found was that 287 chemicals were identified in the umbilical cord blood. The umbilical cord blood of these children collected by Red Cross after the cord was cut harbored pesticides, consumer product ingredients that we use every day, shampoos, deodorants, lotions, makeup, and wastes from burning coal, gasoline, and garbage. All of these compounds were found in the blood. Now, this study represents the first reported cord blood tests for, again, 261 of the targeted chemicals, and the first reported detections in cord blood of 209 compounds. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that before we're even born, we've got all these chemicals in our body. And what does that mean for our physiology? How does it impact us? Well, unfortunately, we don't know, because that hasn't been looked at. And among them were 8 perfluorochemicals used to stain, as stain, oil repellents in fast food packaging, clothes, textiles, carpets, the fabrics of your couches, the fabrics of your beds. This included Teflon, by the way, the chemical PFOA, recently characterized as being a likely human carcinogen by the EPA. Dozens of widely used brominated flame retardants and their toxic byproducts, all of these pesticides, they were all found in our blood. Of the 287 chemicals that we detected in umbilical cord blood, we know that 180 cause cancer in humans or animals. 217 are toxic to the brain and the nervous system, and 208 of them cause birth defects or abnormal development in animal testing. The dangers of pre or postnatal exposure to this complex mixture, this chemical soup of carcinogens, developmental toxins, and neurotoxins have never been studied. Now, you might ask, how is it that these chemicals are released into the environment? Well, again, when it comes to research, the answers you get are based on the questions you ask. And if these questions are never asked, we don't have the answers to that. And in some ways, it's legal, right? These things can come out and they can be put into the environment, exposed to us. And it was never found to be dangerous, but that's because it wasn't looked at that. They never looked at it. In a 2020 paper, so a more recent study published in Environmental Science Technology, researchers detected more than 50 new environmental chemicals lurking in people's bodies, the vast majority of which are little known or unknown compounds. Now, these chemicals, which have never been observed in people before, were discovered in a study of pregnant women and their newborns. And the findings are concerning given that very little is known about these chemicals and their potential health effects. What's more, is pregnant women and their newborns are particularly vulnerable, as a population. So once again, our immune dysfunction occurs way before we even have a chance at breathing the first breath of our own air. Now, I'm not going to go into all the unnecessary interventions that come along with a newborn, but let's just assume that there was a baby that was born naturally, right, at home, a home birth with little to no intervention, no medications on day 1 of life, no injections of any kind, no exposure to, unhealthy environments. I mean, it's crazy to think about that. We have babies born in hospitals, and hospitals are some of the dirtiest. That's where people go to die. That's where nosocomial infections are rampant. But let's just assume, again, we've got a healthy baby, right? Born from day one. We can then move into the next category of dysfunction that's going to assault our immune system. And that's usually going to be food, how we start to feed baby. Now, we all know our fast-paced world often forces us to consume significant amounts of highly processed foods. Again, this can begin with something like formula, and it's pretty nasty when you actually look at some of the formulas that are in infant formula. But even if mom's nursing, I mean, the fact that we all are inundated with these chemicals, in our physiology, it's going to be passed through in some way from mom to baby. But again, we've got these highly processed foods filled with chemicals that our physiology was never designed to deal with. And even if you're a health conscious grocery shopper, you'll know that food today is packaged in all sorts of plastics, corrugated fiber boards and the like. It's very hard to find food that's going to be completely clean unless you're actually growing it in your backyard. How many times have you taken an antibiotic in your life? How many times have babies been given antibiotics over the course of their lives? How many times have you taken an over-the-counter medication, something as simple as like Tylenol, ibuprofen, which disrupts the microbiome and negatively impacts glutathione, a very powerful detoxification compound for our body? How many times have you ingested or inhaled or exposed yourself to the hundreds of thousands of chemicals that are in or around our environment? Putting this all together, I would argue that the collective nature of these industries are a major contributor to humans experiencing a catastrophic increase in chronic diseases, infertility, and metabolic collapse because of the assault these things have on our immune system. Today, we are witnessing an epidemic of neurodegenerative diseases and cancers in adults. Many of these issues can be traced directly back to a poorly functioning immune system. And all of this has really resulted in a disconnect between between physiology, the physiology of organisms in our body, the microorganisms, which includes not only human cells, right, but bacterial cells, viral cells, even parasitic cells, and how we all interact with this environment around us. And if we can improve not only the function of human cells, but the cells of the organisms that live within our microbiome, which act as the life-giving source of sustenance within our digestive tract and our internal organs, the human body is much stronger and becomes much more resilient. Just like we all know that racism has no place in society, the hate and distrust of microorganisms, or the idea that the total annihilation and waging war on these organisms, right? Waging war on bacteria and viruses and all these microorganisms, it's not right. It couldn't be more wrong, any more than racism is wrong. And advances in microbiology, virology, mycology, parasitology have all led to the extensive overuse of pesticides, antifungals, herbicides, and chemical petroleum isolates. And all of these advances have contributed to the degradation of our fellow microorganisms, the insects, our water, our land animals, our soil, the crops that we grow our food from the soil, the water, again, and even our air. It's now detected that 75% of rainfall contains glyphosate. Glyphosate, or Roundup, which Monsanto produces, these chemicals that are forever chemicals. There's almost no place that you can drink water from because of the amount of chemicals running through our tributaries and streams. 200 years ago, you could walk up to a river and drink that water. Today, no way. It's toxic. Traditional medicine has become over-reliant on pharmaceuticals, chemicals, that the EPA has even started to detect levels of these drugs in our own drinking water. These are all chemical weapons targeting our bodies and environment and are ultimately disrupting one of the most important systems for immune function, the gut microbiome. And ironically, the war against bacteria is actually killing us. The microbes that we are literally destroying are the direct link between our bodies and the earth, literally where we came from, right? Where we rose. The dramatic increases in human diseases are only symptoms of the failing biological systems and hierarchy of our planet. The complete breakdown of innate immune barriers, skin disturbances, reactivity of neurological wasting and cognitive dysfunctions, respiratory distress, lung breathing issues, allergies such as increased nose and throat dysfunctions, leaky gut, intestinal permeability, all of this we can see happening right before our eyes. And it's simply a symptom of our own species losing tolerance of its environment. We no longer can literally exist in our environment because of this assault. And when you consider that over half of the human genome is viral in its genetic origin, when we know that we exist because these viruses, came and created mutations that were successfully allowed to, they were successful adaptations, you have to wonder how significant is the threat of viruses, and if it's even a threat at all, right? Our ability to interact with nature at a biological cellular level is paramount to our own survival as a species. And the innate immune system is not fighting against nature. It's an intelligent, dynamic system that allows for the integration and coexistence of nature. It literally allows you to be one with nature, to connect with it. But by separating our human cells away from all the other organisms, we're creating a separation from our own existence. The innate immune system connects us to the outside world and keeps us in a balanced relationship with it. It keeps us in contact with nature by promoting biodiversity, not from eliminating it. And, this could very much be seen as the same way that we've got professionals in our US government that travel to other countries to try to create a connection between our countries and theirs, right? It creates integration. If we didn't have that, we'd have a complete opposite of it. We wouldn't be working together. So these diplomats that we have within our body, these biological diplomats, are very important to be thinking about. Now, we have to coexist with the microorganisms that surround us, and it's the innate immune system via the gut microbiome, the collection of organisms that live in your digestive tract, that assures balance between protection and adaptation. Traditionally, the immune system has been divided into two categories. You've got the innate immunity and the adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is really this first-line defense and relies on structures and cells that are kind of already built into our body. They're already in place. Adaptive immunity houses the reinforcements, and it produces specific responses to foreign material and maintains a memory of what threats we encounter throughout our lives. So it's highly individualized and based on your life experience, versus the innate immune system, where regardless of experience, we all have certain structures and functional components. The innate immune system consists of the protective barriers that themselves can be divided into two categories: structural and functional. Now, the structural components of the innate immune system, this consists of our skin, right? Your skin protects you from the outside world. The mucus layers of your body that you're usually going to find, like our eyes have this mucus layer, your nose and your throat has this mucus layer, your mouth, the cells that line your lungs. So when you breathe air in, these cells have to decide, is it okay to allow this stuff to come in? When stuff lands on your skin, is it okay to allow it to pass through when you breathe in through your nose and your mouth? The lining along your brain that protects your brain, that's called the blood-brain barrier. And the cells that line along the intestines, that's your intestinal barrier. This is all these structural components of the innate immune system. The functional components of the innate immune system include specialized types of cells, specialized white blood cells. It includes specialized biochemical processes and pathways. And there's even some genetic editing that we're going to talk about. Now, beginning with specific types of white blood cells, you've got specialized white blood cells that have very specific functions. And I like to think of these cells as kind of like the different divisions of our military. So just like we have an army, and there's a Navy and the Marines and the Air Force, the Coast Guard, special forces, the immune system has different divisions of white blood cells. And these cells are known as neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, basophils, mast cells. And we can talk about the function there, like neutrophils. These are white blood cells that generally attack or go on the offense when there's bacteria that your body doesn't like. Lymphocytes, these are white blood cells that attack viruses, again, when your body doesn't like it or when there's problems there. Eosinophils, they protect us from allergens, dust, pollen, oak, mold, and even parasites and other environmental chemicals. There's basophils. Basophils are these large cells that will increase when there's an inflammatory reaction or multicellular infections, larger, let's just say, pathogens. Like I said, there's macrophages, mast cells, there's natural killer cells, dendritic cells. All of these cells are part of the innate immune system. Now, somebody's ability to respond to their environment is largely going to be based on their response of these specialized cells. I mean, obviously, if your Navy's asleep and somebody comes and attacks your water, the Navy's not going to be able to respond. And of course, there's a lot to discuss of what could be impacting that. Again, this is why I started with the chemical farming onslaught, the chemical exposure from day one, even before we're born, that could be impacting the way these cells function. And then, of course, as you go through your life, you just accumulate more and more of this stuff, sometimes intentionally. Here's an antibiotic, here's a proton pump inhibitor, here's an antidepressant, all these things that could impact the way that these cells are functioning. And you have to ask, what is the impact of the combinations of all this stuff? Well, nobody looks at that. Nobody tells you that, right? Just say, hey, take this, call me in the morning. Let's see how you do. Now, if that's not already complicated, there's a biochemical cascade of cells known as the complement system. And the complement system consists of several proteins produced primarily by the liver. So again, let's assume you have a healthy liver, so this is functioning the way it needs to be. The liver, by the way, is the primary detoxification organ. So again, somebody who's taking lots of medications, liver is going to be dysfunctional. Somebody who's exposed to a lot of chemicals, eating processed foods, consuming a high sugar diet, liver is going to be taxed. The complement system is definitely not going to be working at its optimal capacity. But the complement system, again, is these different proteins that circulate our blood and attach to foreign objects and materials. And if this is not mind-blowing already, right, that these cells kind of go and connect and allow for us to detect what's good and what's bad, there's viral genetic updates and what I like to call interspecies immunomodulation that we can discuss. And that, again, is just super complex. First, let's talk about genetic coding or updates. This is often an underappreciated aspect of the innate immune system and a topic that requires much attention, especially right now with the fear surrounding viruses and viral load. So again, especially given the fact that we're purposely injecting mRNA into our body for the first time in history to change or in our response to the current pandemic. Now, the replication of RNA viruses and a few DNA viruses generate these perfectly base paired double-stranded DNA fragments, genetic fragments, in the cytoplasm of our cells. And these perfectly paired strands of fragments are unusual in humans and recognized by the innate immune system as foreign, right? So your immune system says, hey, this is interesting, this is new, what's going on? Well, in molecular biology, the fragments are called pathogen-associated molecular patterns, PAMPs, PAMPs. Our innate immune system recognizes PAMPs as foreign through specialized receptors in our cells called pattern recognition receptors, PRRs. And the PRRs join up and coat the double-stranded fragments of RNA or DNA. And once the fragment is coated, it moves it to the nucleus of the cell where it sets off a series of innate immune reactions that are basically designed to check out the stranger. It would be like you arrive in a country and you have to go through customs where they need to check you out. You're foreign and they need to check you out. In some instances, antiviral proteins become activated and the genetic fragment is degraded. If the country realizes that you're some criminal or, you're somebody who shouldn't be there, they're gonna incarcerate you, take you to jail, or send you back. In other instances, the sequence is read by our own genetic machinery and essentially scanned for any useful information. And this is important to understand because these viruses and particles are all in our environment. They're getting data from the environment. And again, this is what I call interspecies immunomodulation. It's another organism, another system that can come into our system and give us an update. So if something interesting is found, it can be edited and integrated into our own genome. How cool is that? Integration of viral genetic information into the human genome was once thought to only happen so that the virus could actually survive and multiply. But today, we now understand that the innate immune system allows for this vital genetic information into our genome as a means to improve our own code, our own genetic code, much like the way computers receive updates to correct course for changes that have happened. So that's pretty fascinating. And historically, integration of viral genetic information into our genome has provided an important means of increasing our own biodiversity. Again, collecting information from the environment comes into our body. Some of it is bad, so the immune system addresses it. Some of it is considered beneficial, so we integrate it. And now we know that over 50% of our entire genome can be traced to a viral origin, and up to 2% of our genome is actually viral itself. Now, many of the ancient viral genetic programs have allowed us to thrive as a species. And it is being increasingly appreciated that viral genes control many of our own physiological functions and metabolic pathways. I've talked about this in other videos where we know that the development of the placenta, it allowed us to actually be able to do that. This was viral updates. The fact that we have stem cells that allow us to regenerate. Again, that was a viral update. Now, some researchers have referred to the process of integrating viral genetic elements into our own genome as genetic domestication. And finally, we have the gut microbiome, where, again, we really have a lot of intraspecies immunomodulation, multiple different species that are not of human origin that modify or enhance or affect our immune system, immunomodulation. Basically, the microbiome is this collection in your digestive tract, is this collection of foreign organisms, viral, bacterial, fungal, in some cases even parasitic, that influence our immune system in profound ways, many of them positive. And the compounds and the proteins produced within the microbiome have all sorts of different functions. Some proteins, they can be directly toxic to other invading cells. So some of these organisms actually protect from other, pathogenic infections. These organisms help us to digest the food that we consume. They help us to extract energy and nutrients from the food. Others signal the need for additional resources, and they actually recruit the immune system, to come in and help. And this is why the health of our gut microbiome is one of the most important factors in determining the appropriateness of our immune response. It's why food is such a powerful form of medicine, but also opposite, food can be the most powerful form of creating disease, depending on the choices that you make. And it's not just food, but anything that you put into your body, medications, artificial sweeteners, colors, chemically enhanced flavors, you name it. And being on the front line and, one of the few regions of the inner body that is in direct contact with elements from the outside world, the gut microbiome has evolved to have a mutually beneficial relationship with all these microbes that we often think of as being bad. Most people know of E. coli, right? And we all think like, oh gosh, E. coli is bad. Well, turns out you have a normal amount of E. coli that is in your digestive tract that is supposed to be there. E. coli contributes to mucus production and protection. Now, yeah, there's some species that are really bad and can make you sick, but it's not as complex. It's not as easy as just saying getting those bad bugs in there is going to cause problems. If you have a lack of diversity, if you have a dysfunction that causes the immune system to not work the way that it needs to, in that instance, it's not going to work well for you. So when you think about it, again, I just mentioned that the microbiome is really this collection of organisms that is connected to the outside world that connects our internal body. When you really think about it, the digestive tract, with our microbiome being part of that, is not inside our body. Let's repeat that. The intestines and the intestinal lining of the cells are actually outside of your body. Now, think of it this way. You can think of your mouth all the way down to your anus, right? Your butthole. It's one long tube from your mouth all the way down. This tube separates the outside world out here from the insides of your body cavity. So if you can visualize this tube going down, when you put things into your mouth, the lining of your intestines and your microbiome, it's actually keeping that food outside of your body. What makes it into your body cavity has to be approved. Again, customs, right? It has to decide. So it makes sense that we would dedicate such a sophisticated system of protection because, again, you eat food, your body doesn't know what's in that food. So as it travels down and you're breaking it down, your cells have to decide, do we let these nutrients through into our body? And whatever it says, nope, it's going to pass out, through the other way as waste. So the gut microbiome lives in harmony with millions of other bacteria and fungi and viruses on purpose to all harmonize and allow for the detection of things that are not normal. And often, not only are these microbes allowed to live inside us, but their genetic information is actually transferred to our genome through the actions of the gut microbiome. Millions of years of evolution have put the gut microbiome at the center of the innate immune response, where it manages the delicate balance between gut repair, threat mitigation, and promoting genetic diversity, allowing you to update your body to exist in the environment that's changing around us. And if you separate yourself from that, you're not going to get those updates and you're going to find yourself in some hot water whenever something bad comes along. You're not going to be able to survive. And of course, we can see that happening right now with the pandemic. Some people get this virus, doesn't do anything to them. Others get it and they have a really hard time overcoming it. Now, in closing, I want you to know that you're not a fragile snowflake. I want you to know that the human and non-human cells that make up what you have come to know, again, the human and the non-human cells that make up what you have, right? What you are, have come to know as yourself. These organisms make you resilient and powerful. We don't live in a world that is attacking us. We live in a world where the destruction of nature and millions of years of programming are now changing our biology in profound ways. And as we increase the toxicity of our lives through contaminated food, air, water, and mental stress, we prevent the microbiome within our digestive tract from performing its life-giving functions. And as we ingest more antibiotics and we fight more viruses and we pollute our bodies with more pharmaceuticals and unnecessary compounds that literally fight our own biology, we place in a tremendous amount of stress and pressure on these living systems. And it's important to remember that the innate immune system isn't simply this war machine going out and attacking. It also has this important factor of restoration and regeneration, regenerative functions in our bodies. The question becomes, is your body in a state of defense where you're defending everything, or are you in a state of nurture and you're thriving within the environment because you're working with the environment? You're not separate from it. When our microbiome and all the organisms it contains is suffering, the reparative actions of the innate immune system are inhibited and the balance is tipped from health to illness by triggering an immune attack upon ourselves, which ultimately manifests as chronic disease. And as the integrity of our intestinal barrier is diminished, inflammatory cascades are going to follow, and this creates disturbance in other innate immune structures. So you start to get a breakdown again of the blood-brain barrier. Literally, your brain is assaulted, and you get brain fog and cognitive decline, neurodegenerative conditions, things like autism, which has dramatically gone up over the last 20 years. ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, all these things, neural inflammation. You start to see weakness in the pulmonary barrier, your lungs. You start to see respiratory, conditions that go up, asthma, COPD. I mean, you start to see all these weaknesses in our respiration, in our recovery, our ability to handle things from a pulmonary aspect. You have a breakdown in the nasopharynx barrier, your nose and throat. Sinusitis, allergies, mucus production, right? Runny nose, nasal drip. I mean, all this stuff. You start to see weakness in these things. All of these things are connected, by the way. We start to see an increased incidence in food sensitivities and intolerances. We cannot handle the foods because we're separated from our environment. That food is different. It's not of the earth, right? So you have to, again, think about how all these things work together. And as a result, we are overcome by chronic illness and thereby become susceptible to long-term complications of infections. Now, what could be a simple viral infection in this state becomes a situation similar to throwing gasoline on fire, or an infection our bodies would have, under normal, natural circumstances, been able to deal with, instead causes this exaggerated, unnecessary immune response, and it results in irreversible tissue damage. But there is hope. And I truly believe that we can correct course collectively, and we can focus on nourishing the biome that we live in, literally our earth, beginning with our own biome, our internal biome physically, the biome that you literally live in, your house, thinking about how you can clean your house and work towards a more natural living environment, your city, the state that your city's in, the country, right? It just expands out from there. And we can all work towards decreasing toxicity in our lives, and we can choose to support those organizations and companies that share this goal. And in doing so, we can shift the healthcare landscape from one of barely surviving and struggling with chronic disease to completely thriving and literally lifting up the human species for the next level of growth and transformation that we all deserve to transition into. And for me, I really think about the companies that I support, the things that I buy, because everything has a footprint, right? If I buy a food that's packaged in plastic, there's a footprint there. I'm supporting the chemical industries that produce that plastic. I'm supporting the politicians that are bought by lobbyists that support those companies that support, that chemical composition of food packaging. So these are the things that we really need to be thinking about. Support local farmers, support regenerative agriculture, support a toxic-free consumer environment, support the fact that we don't need more medications. We need more people to be healthy. It's not about pumping your body full of blood pressure medication, but asking the question, why is your blood pressure elevated in the first place? Could it be nutritional issues? Could it be physical health issues, physical fitness issues, stress? Maybe we should start there, right? I really do hope that this message resonates with you. I hope that you can connect with this digitally even. And I hope that more so than anything, that it results in some kind of transformation and change for you personally, or anybody that, that hears this, that you can share this message with. Now go and do good things.